Leading Entrepreneurs of the World, 2022. We are now joined once again by our good friend, Dr. Henning Stein. He is the global head of thought leadership and market strategy at Invesco. Welcome, Henning. Nice to see you again. Today, we're going to talk about, his topic is the Metaverse, weapon of mass disruption. Impressive title. All right, let me hand it off. Here we go. Thank you, Henning. Good morning.
Good morning, and thank you, Glenn, for the introduction, and thank you everyone for joining me really today and for taking part in this great event as a whole. So as you've heard, I work in the world of investment, so like entrepreneurs, investors are always on the lookout for the next big thing. Well, about a year ago, so I wrote about an article, something I believe could be really the next big thing, augmented reality, and I had just used Oculus, in fact, the Oculus headset for the first time, and I was astonished by what this technology can do, right? Well, 1 minute I was meditating by a virtual fireside, next I was fishing in a virtual lake, and then I was jumping out of a virtual helicopter. And I'm not saying that reflects my average day in the real world, of course, but I was really amazed by the look and feel and how convincing everything was. So I wrote this article predicting that the development of augmented reality would have a bigger disruptive impact than the iPhone. And then a few months later, Mark Zuckerberg started talking about the metaverse, and now it seems like everyone is talking about it. I won't pretend Mark read my article and was inspired to change the world, but it is nice to be proven right now and then. And of course, most next big things fail to live up to this hype. They generate excitement, build expectation, and then usually fade away. And even today, in the age of the new normals, very breakthroughs, or very few breakthroughs are truly really capable of affecting nearly every aspect of a day's life, like the iPhone. But the metaverse increasingly looks like the real deal, and I think it's a game changer, and that's why I refer to it as a weapon of mass disruption. So let's begin by explaining what the metaverse actually is, and then we're going to look at some broad structural trends that are driving it, and we can then explore the scale of the effort needed actually to realize this idea and the impact of a fully functioning metaverse is likely to have. And we can then round off by considering some of the opportunities and risks we are likely to encounter in this space as it continues to grow. Okay, let's quickly talk about origins. The first thing we need to acknowledge is the concept of the metaverse itself isn't new at all. So Mark wasn't the first person to speak about it, neither was I. And I have to admit, I certainly wasn't the first person to write about it. So in fact, the term metaverse first appeared 30 years ago in Snow Crash. There was a novel by science fiction author Neil Stephenson. And the internet, I mean, imagine it was still years away from really becoming mainstream in the 90s, right? So it's amazing that this guy actually could have predicted where it might lead. And he basically described a virtual reality successor in which people could use avatars to engage both with each other and with software. And as the name suggests, this concept goes beyond the existing universe. So hence meta, which by the way means beyond, and then verse. So history has shown, I think, many of these ideas that first appear in science fiction, eventually then later become science fact. And that's exactly the case here with the metaverse. And Stevenson's vision, I think, has been slowly taking shape ever since Snow Crash hit the shelves. And maybe we can take a look at some of the milestones so far. So gaming has played a big role, obviously. Second Life was launched in 2003, probably the most important trailblazer in this respect. And it helped really pioneer ideas such buying virtual land, also using platform tools to build almost anything you can imagine. And if we skip forward a few years, we also see Fortnite on here, which offers a really better idea of the likely look and feel of what you can expect in the metaverse. And such a trend occurs when you see the growth of a particular technology or factor becomes really sufficient to trigger a really substantial lasting shift in society. And the metaverse has, I think, all the hallmarks of a genesis trend. The market has been tipped to grow rapidly, massively in the next few years. It was valued something like 48 billion in 2020, and that's expected to go up to 280 billion by 25, and almost a trillion by 28. So in other words, it's a market that's set to rise from less than 50 billion to nearly a trillion in less than a decade. So maybe let's examine why that is. Here are the three key drivers of the metaverse growth. We already talked about the tech aspect, so maybe let's focus on the other two. In light of lockdowns and other restrictions, COVID-19 obviously accelerated a lot of this stuff, broader reassessment also of how we able to interact, and many people are now more willing to connect virtually. I mean, I'm a big fan of this. Instead of flying around and spending my time in hotels, this is much more efficient. And that underlines, I think, the general appeal and applicability of the metaverse concept. So demographic forces also fueling this metaverse rise. This is largely due to the world's biggest demographic cohort, that Generation C. The members of Generation C, also known as Zoomers, by the way, now. They were born between the late 90s and the early 2010s. And they really represent the most tech-driven demographic. I like to keep up with tech myself, but the average Zoomer makes me feel like a caveman sometimes. And Gen Z is also the cohort most likely to really accept and take advantage of disruption. Or they don't just enjoy progress; they fully embrace change. And for example, research has found most Gen Z members would happily hang out in a virtual game environment without even playing the game. And I think that's a very important point. So we have this relentless march of tech. We have a major accelerant of tech, and now we have an unprecedented appetite for tech. And that's an extremely powerful combination. And it's one that's really helping bring us closer and closer to a fully functioning metaverse. And now we all know the past isn't necessarily a guide to the future, but we also know history may not repeat, but tends to rhyme. And I mentioned this because we can get a useful idea of the metaverse potential by briefly reflecting on a previous genesis trend. And it's now more than 15 years since Apple launched the iPhone. And at the time in January 2007, if you remember, Apple's share price was something like $3. And by January this year, that was $160. So why? Because really the smartphone is now right at the heart of our day-to-day lives. And that kind of business growth is obviously music to the ears of entrepreneurs and investors like us, but it actually tells only half the story. So sure, Apple went on to become $1 trillion company, but it was already very successful, a household name when the iPhone made its debut. What's less appreciated is that other businesses involved in the smartphone business, they enjoyed growth. That was even more spectacular. So most people don't know names like Inox Corp, South Korean manufacturer of semiconductors, or take Canon Optoelectronics, Chinese producer of LEDs. Both have generated investment returns around 20,000%, far in excess of Apple's return since the iPhone launch. And they have done this simply not by designing and marketing smartphones, but by making the components that allow smartphones to function. So the point here is that it's not just the high-profile architects like Meta that drive a genesis trend. They're likely to benefit over the long term. We call them enabler, right? Enablers of this genesis trend are likely to prosper, and they may even enjoy the greatest long-term growth of all. And with that crucial notion in mind, let's take a closer look at some of the metaverse architects, and then we look at the enablers and to get a better idea. So obvious starting point, going back to my article last year, is the field of augmented reality and virtual reality, AR and VR. And this is really key to creating truly immersive platforms, right? Augmented, probably the most advanced, where it's almost like a Minority Report. Everything floats around you and you're able to manipulate things without having physical devices in front. That's a little bit still out there, but it's coming, and it's already technology exists, right? It's just about scale, and this is really key to creating this truly immersive feeling. Augmented reality already being used in mainstream digital products and services. Think about Snapchat and Pokemon Go, most high-profile examples. Next, we have, of course, computer hardware, the basic building blocks, if you will, of any digital systems. So huge demands are going to be made of this market. And the metaverse will need processors, so it will need semiconductors, and it will need power supplies, motherboards, even ventilation vents. So here again, it would be wrong to just presume, a single company is going to dominate. Many market leaders are going to merge there. And what about artificial intelligence? I believe Mark Zuckerberg has described this as the most important foundational technology of our time. I think he's right. AI will provide the scaffolding needed to create virtual environments, sophisticated forms of metaverse user engagement. And Meta, formerly known as Facebook, of course, that's really throwing its weight now behind this. Again, though, don't rule out the lesser known players. The metaverse will obviously also need new levels of wireless broadband connectivity. That means 5G is going to benefit from this, and 5G beyond, right? We're going to go further. The past offers a lesson here as well, in the form of companies that were at the forefront of earlier telecommunication revolutions. A great example, by the way, is Qualcomm. You might remember from the 90s, right? Pioneer of 2G. And their investment returns have gone up by also more than 20,000% in the early 90s. And lastly, we have cryptocurrency and blockchain, and I mentioned these earlier in the discussion. Cryptocurrency, blockchain will be essential, ensuring metaverse transforms not just how we interact, but also how we transact, right? That's important. They will also underpin innovations like non-fungible tokens. We're experimenting with this at Invesco through our real estate business, for example. And that already accounts for billions of dollars worth of transactions in the market, right? Overall, then we can be sure the metaverse won't come into effect overnight, and it's going to be a long journey. There's not going to be one single tech titan that will control this. Nobody's going to own it, just like with the internet. It's going to represent really the sum of the work of many, many contributors. So the metaverse is going to take time, and it's going to require an enormous effort from a wide range of architects and enablers. And this is good news for the global investment community, as I'm sure you appreciate. It's also good news for the world's entrepreneurs. And there's more good news. As I said at the outset, metaverse is likely to have an effect on almost every aspect of our lives. Aside from the internet, smartphone, it's really hard to think of many recent innovations that have achieved that kind of level of impact. And let's consider some of the sectors that could benefit, starting with one that has done so much to develop the metaverse so far, which is gaming. So various platforms in this space are increasingly incorporating technologies like AR, virtual reality, and AI to really enhance that crucial sense of immersion. Take Epic Games, which developed Fortnite, of course. They completed 2 billion round of funding earlier this year to support their long-term metaverse efforts. Take Roblox. The Roblox platform went public in last year. So in just a few months, it announced, plans to build out metaverse around their user community. Nike, of course, launched Nike Land on Roblox last November. This allows participants to play virtual sports by using special sensors in their smartphones. They're also testing with people according to geographical identification how certain products can be placed in the real windows, right? Because they learn from the metaverse and then they apply that in their marketing strategy in those regions, in those sectors, in the shops themselves. It's quite amazing. There's also Unity, which is a leading designer. It's a leading designer platform of games, so the game engine, if you will. The 3D operating system they're running, a very, very sophisticated one. We can think of Unity as almost like the Shopify of gaming. So their business model relies on users creating their own content and then monetizing their work. And I don't know how much this is, but it's like 70-80% they're controlling the market already for this stuff. They're now shown how gaming platforms can branch out. So Disney, for example, used that in 2019 for The Lion King, this 3D technology. So it's not only about games. And this tells you a little bit the growth trajectory behind these firms. Social media may be the most obvious beneficiary sector, especially given the decision last October to rebrand Facebook. Meta spent at least 10 billion last year alone on their Facebook Reality Labs. That's the Metaverse division developing AR and VR projects. And most people still view the company as a social media giant, but Mark Zuckerberg has openly said he wants it to be seen as a metaverse business. He's very serious about it. E-learning is one of the sectors, in addition to what I just mentioned, that's really flourishing flourished during the pandemic, obviously. And the metaverse, again, is likely to strengthen this even further. There are other sectors like the military, for example, that you mentioned that they're experimenting with this because it also can save lives if you can simulate some of these activities. So transformation already underway. VR avatars are now being used in online science courses in South Korea. Video conferencing, another very interesting field where the potential power of the metaverse is then delivering immersive shared experiences, and it's very, very apparent. What we're doing right now is evidence actually of that, right? Because we're doing it to Zoom, but I guess the likes of Teams and Zoom are really just scratching the surface of what should be possible. And you can see that a little bit with Microsoft Mesh, where they use Teams then to connect that with avatars and have that as a virtual social space experience. Entertainment industry really ripe for disruption. I mean, the metaverse could mean no traveling, no queuing, perfect use of every show. To some extent, again, future is already here. I mean, Ariana Grande is among the stars whose avatars have performed one of the Fortnite on the Fortnite platform recently. E-commerce will also undergo major upheaval, not least because the metaverse will allow us to try products before we buy them. I did this last weekend, for example, like sunglasses. You scan your face and then you try on the sunglasses. I mean, these are simple tools, but quite sophisticated underneath. And some companies already developing, branded items for avatars. I mean, believe it or not, I mean, this Gucci bag has a virtual Gucci bag sold for more than the real one, right? I mean, it's crazy. Finally, Metaverse is likely, obviously, to accelerate the revolution or evolution of telehealth, principally making remote patient-doctor interaction even more personal. One medical startup, XR Health, already developed a virtual environment that provides the support for physical therapy. We looked also at Acuvane, it's a very interesting company, and medical imaging company. They're using augmented reality to map the veins on your skin before they actually do something, and makes it much more safer and agreeable for patients. And research has shown this kind of approach makes this injection and that goes storing blood much easier, safer, more efficient. So every one of these markets is expected to grow significantly as the metaverse continues to take shape. Figures speak for themselves. The entertainment market is expected to be worth $500 billion by 25. E-commerce already more than 20 trillion. And I will say it again, this is good news for investors and for entrepreneurs. This is a genesis trend with really long-term, far-reaching application implications. Final thoughts along these opportunities, of course, there are risks, right? I mean, Metaverse could be the new World Wide Web, or it could be the next Wild West, right? And maybe the biggest threat is what's known as the pacing problem. This is what occurs when innovation greatly outstrips regulation. And it's a problem arguably existed for centuries, but it's never been as pressing or as prevalent as it's right now. I mean, it's strange when you watch Congress grilling these tech people, right, for simple things they don't understand often, right? And it shows how much concern there is from regulators. And I think tech is responding in the right way of making it transparent and taking away this anxiety. The issue is essentially this: technology changes exponentially. Social, economic, legal systems that take really long time to change. So it's very incremental. And we saw that during the early years of the internet. We are seeing it again now with the rise of concepts like crypto, tokenization, AI. Well, what could be the worst case scenario? Lack of really meaningful frameworks could leave us with a state-of-the-art free for all in which anything goes. And there have already been reports of really nasty things going on the dark side of this. But I wouldn't say this is different from the internet, right? We know it from the internet. We know bullying, we know extremism, we know this is unfortunate human behavior, and you will reflect it. You see reflected in any technology. So I would not put that as a strong risk. I think it can be controlled, just like we control it in other areas of social life. And there are also challenges a little bit about social consideration, privacy. But again, I think this applies to every kind of technology, not only the metaverse, and we will manage it. Computing capabilities, another one. We need to increase this by many orders, many magnitudes to deliver this truly immersive experience. We then need regulators, policymakers to play their part. And that won't be straightforward. It will be a long journey. Broader risk, I would perhaps also mention the investment risk, of course. I mean, these are risks that are also relevant for you as entrepreneurs, because entrepreneurs obviously need investor support. I guess the risk most investors are likely to think of first is having an excessive concentration of tech stocks in their portfolio. And the idea that the tech sector has become overcrowded has been around for some time, especially during after the pandemic. You see that during the pandemic, really big tech basically powered the S&P 500. It's changing now. You see corrections like Peloton lost 90% of its peak value. And that's normal. So you have to look at that stuff really long term. You can't just think about next quarter, next year. This is things that are going on in 5-10 years. So you want to get exposure now so that you get these upsides. So I think that is a very long-term story. Requires different investor behavior. And final words, maybe it's now a year since I just jumped out of this virtual helicopter. I was convinced back then that that I had discovered the next big thing. Today, I'm even more convinced. I think the metaverse is coming. It's amazing to imagine what it might allow us to do in a few years from now. Of course, I hope many of you will do much more than just imagine it. I hope many of you will play a part in actually making it happen. And thank you again for joining me today. Please feel free to contact me on the email that you see on the screen. And that's for now. Thank you.
Dr. Henning, thank you. Terrific presentation as always. State of the art, cutting edge. It's amazing how gaming was there early. Gaming continues to stay there, but all the other industries, as you said, healthcare and commerce, and people looking ahead. I loved your either or. Next World Wide Web or Wild West. We all need to be very careful, right, as we look forward. And it's an exciting time. It's an exciting time. Excellent job as always. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Glenn.
At LEW again this year, and we'll see you in the future. Take good care.
On Wednesday.
On Wednesday, even well, the future's 2 days away. Even better. Take care. Thanks.